Hi, I'm Mike Dilk and you're listening to the Relax Back UK show, the show that explores all kinds of health topics relevant to you, your family and your friends. Each week I talk to expert guests from a range of backgrounds to inform and entertain you. So please do join the Relax Back UK family and stay tuned.
Hi, and thank you for joining me on the Relax Back UK show. Now, everybody knows how many steps a day we should aim for. Or do we?
A fabulous meta-analysis paper was published in Lancet Public Health, which took a look at all of the evidence for step count. And actually what it demonstrated was that the optimum dose to optimise health benefits is actually 7,000 steps a day.
Olympian and exercise academic Greg Whyte has something to say on the subject. Then here is a very scary statistic.
So we think there are about 40,000 cardiac arrests out of hospital in the UK a year, but only about 1 in 10 of those people survive. So it's a common medical emergency with
Right.
not the greatest of outcomes.
Could you help someone who's suffering from a cardiac arrest or is bleeding to death? Maybe you need to listen to Professor Andrew Hartle, Chief Medical Officer of St John's Ambulance. So please do join me for a great show. Thank you. I always enjoy chatting with Greg Whyte, OBE, Olympian in the modern pentathlon and exercise academic. He's been on the show before, so the first thing I did was thank him for coming back.
Absolute pleasure. It's always great to be on, Mike.
This is a bit of a difference though, because you're up Snowdon, potentially on a treadmill. I'm actually on my static bike in my office because I didn't want to be outdone. And I think both can be argued really are a bit crazy, but I think your situation's a bit crazier than mine. So the first question's got to be, did you get the trainer?
Well, it's an interesting one, and actually the Snowdon railway team are absolutely fantastic up here, and it's a great way to travel up. And of course with the treadmill, I wasn't going to carry that, so yes, we did get the train up to bring the treadmill up. But it's amazing how many people there are out, and I don't know if you can see behind me, but the weather is traditionally inclement, to put it in its most positive sense.
You can't see out the window, can
No,
you?
exactly. And we've been up here 2 days now, and it's been like that most of the time. But that said, there are so many hikers up here. They've either come up on the train and are walking around the summit, or they've actually done the full trek and walked up. But it's fantastic, and it's great to listen to them and talk to them about what they're doing and why they're here. It really exemplifies the great outdoors and how beneficial the great outdoors is.
Well, so you've been talking to them about why they're here, but why are you there? Why are you on a treadmill up Snowdon?
Well, one of the things that we're doing is working with Ordnance Survey, is we're taking a look at this, what effectively is dogma or myth around 10,000 steps. The fact is that the 10,000 step myth comes from it was born of a marketing campaign when the pedometer, these tiny devices which measure step count, when they were first launched in the mid-60s in Japan. And since that time, it's become common parlance that we should be targeting 10,000 steps a day. And yet very recently, a fabulous meta-analysis paper was published in Lancet Public Health, which took a look at all of the evidence for step count. And actually what it demonstrated was that the optimum dose to optimise health benefits is actually 7,000 steps a day.
All right, so let me just butt in. So this 10,000 steps, there's no science behind that.
No, but no is the answer to that. It literally is a marketing campaign, and it happened to work well around the language at the time.
So my thought there is that the marketing team from the 1960s should get some kind of mega award because that worked well, didn't it?
Well, it did, but to be honest with you, Mike, there are many things in modern life that actually, if you drill into it and take a look at what the evidence is, there is a relative dearth of evidence for many of the things that we believe, and I think that's why it's so important that we continue to research and continue to develop our knowledge, so that what we are accurate about the information that we give in the public.
All right. So taking that on a bit, you mentioned a target and what seems to be like an optimum amount of steps. Should we have a target? Where did that info come from? Is that based on science? All that sort of thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think a target is really important. I mean, in common parlance, we call it goal setting, and I think actually for many people, goal setting is really important. But equally, I think what we have to remember is it's not just about setting a goal, it's making sure you set the right goal. And I think that when you consider that 11 million adults in the United Kingdom do less than 30 minutes of physical activity in a week, they are regarded as inactive. Then actually sometimes if we set that goal at whether it's 7,000, 10,000, at the end of the day, the paradox is that we're stood at the top of Widfer, otherwise known as Mount Snowdon. But actually some of these targets are insurmountable because they just feel like a mountain to climb. And so I think goals are incredibly important, but it's making sure that you develop the right goal for you to keep you physically active.
No, I get it. So, I mean, for some people, it might as well be 1 million steps, because actually 10,000 is just a bit silly, really.
Absolutely. Yeah. And
okay.
The interesting thing here, Mike, I think to remember is that actually the greatest health benefits of physical activity come for those that are currently inactive. And you've only got to increase your activity by a very small amount to gain health benefits. So this is a message for everybody. If you are physically active, then being more physically active will be more beneficial. But actually, for those people who are inactive, who are struggling with motivation, just remember that they are at the point where they can get the greatest gains from increasing their step count on a daily basis consistently.
I guess the link from the top of Snowdon isn't quite as good as from my office.
It's very true, but the team here are incredible. The weather is incredibly inclement, and at the top of Snowdon, annually they get about 5 metres of rain. And I think in the past 2 days we've made up about 4 metres of that. So, so just to get a signal from up here is incredible.
Yeah. All right. So you're coming in and out, but you started to talk about motivation. So I think that's worth just spending some time on, because I'm on an exercise bike now, and if you look for adverts for exercise bikes, the people riding these things, they're all 20 and 30 and beautiful people. They're not average. Now you're doing this thing for the OS. Now you're not 20 or 30. In fact, you're similar to my age. Because I know.
How dare you, Mike?
I know you've got a birthday coming up, and I won't let on how old you're going to be. But I've got a birthday coming up, and I'm going to be 60, and you're about a year younger than me. But the point.
Well, at what point in that, Mike, were you not telling people my age?
Exactly. Well, let me tell some more truth about you. You're an Olympian, right? You're not average. These 20 or 30 beautiful somethings advertising bikes, they're not average people. So I'm old and I'm fat, right? I think I'm more average. So to be honest, I think I should be the poster boy for Ordnance Survey and not some Olympian, because people will look at these 20 and 30 beautiful somethings or an ex-Olympian and think, well, forget it. It's the equivalent of what it might as well be 1 million steps.
No, I absolutely agree.
So I'm making my ploy for the job now.
That's it. This is your congratulations, Mike. We'll let you know, okay? No, but listen, the point you make is really important, Mike, and that is that often we talk about elite sport being inspirational. Whereas actually, when you look at the data, what you see is that what watching elite sport does generally increases the activity of those people who are already active. It doesn't have a great deal of effect on those people who are inactive. In other words, it's more about entertainment than it is inspiration. And I think that you're right. There's a huge amount of work to be done. And actually, if you take a look, the antithesis of what you've just described would be things like This Girl Can campaign, where actually what they're doing is that they're using real women to demonstrate what can be achieved. And I think you're right, is that actually from a marketing perspective, what we should be doing is we're talking to everybody. And we've already said that the greatest gains are made at the lower end of the spectrum. And so therefore, just by changing physical activity habits for those people who are currently inactive, will have a profound effect not only on them, but also on the economy.
Right. Well, there was something interesting that came out with the press release, actually, which was the number of people that do set themselves a step count. And that figure came out as 29%. Now, I don't know how that was arrived at, but that seems quite impressive. And I was thinking, can that really be true?
No, I think interesting, and that was a survey that the OS developed, and we spoke to people across the UK. And I think if you think about it, that's probably about right, because actually, a third of people, generally, those people who are already active, they probably do use 10,000 steps, and now we know that can be 7,000 steps a day as a target for them on a daily basis. So actually that makes sense. But of course, that's a third of people, but it's the 2/3 of people who aren't targeting physical activity. They're the guys that we're trying to reach. And I think by making sure that we are setting realistic goals, I think what that will do is it will change people's attitudes towards goal setting and should increase that number.
Okay. Excellent. All right. Well, I've made my pitch for a jog. So let's forget the motivation side of things. If people are motivated, we can't all pop up Snowdon. What can we actually do? Where can we go for a nice walk?
Well, for me, OS, the Ordnance Survey, have got an app called OS Maps, and it is absolutely fantastic. Is that effectively what you can do is you can go on there and you can plan routes, the distance you want to walk, what type of walk, and actually you can do that anywhere in the UK. And I think the great thing about that is that...
You're having a bit of trouble with the connection at the top of Snowdon at the minute. Do you think it would work up there just now?
Well, in fact, it does.
Does it? All right.
It works really, because what you can do is you can download it onto your smartphone or whatever technology you've got, and you can use it off there without being online. So it really is a fabulous tool. That what you can do
is... like a map, in fact.
Well, it's exactly... Well, look, listen, I mean, obviously OS does paper maps. And in fact, they're currently in the process of redesigning those maps to make them more accessible to people. It is about that. It's making sure that what you're using is what works for you. Some people like to hold a piece of paper when they go out. Others, rely on their smartphone or devices. But I think for me, what it's all about, and it doesn't matter whether it's urban or whether it's in the countryside, actually it's about exploration. It's just go out there and explore. And being in the great outdoors heightens all of those benefits that we know we get from physical activity. And crucially for me is that when you go outdoors, you can do it with other people. So the wonderful thing about being outdoors is that you can improve your social health as well as your physical, mental and emotional health.
I suppose from that point of view, if there must be lots of local groups where you can go walking, so it won't be a solitary exercise.
Exactly right, but equally, what a great time, and certainly, we do it as a family, and good friends of mine, do it as a family, just to go out for a walk with the family. It's one of those times where, in terms of communication, I've got 3 kids, and it's great. You're away from electronics, you're away from the TV, you're wandering around in a beautiful environment, and it gives you that opportunity to communicate and actually connect with people. So it's a wonderful thing to do, whether it's with an organised walking group or whether it's you call a mate up to go out for a walk, or you go out with your family.
Yeah. No, I get that. What about here's something though. You're on a treadmill at the top of Snowdon. What about a treadmill under your desk?
Yeah.
What do you think of those?
Well, look, the key message here, I think, Mike, is that every step counts, and so therefore every movement counts. And I think rather than thinking about these big overarching goals, which are great, and we should certainly be aspiring to get there, I think probably the best message to send, and one of 2 messages. One is, look, do more today than you did yesterday. Mm-hmm. And if you can target that, what you do is you progressively become active. So if you're currently doing nothing, just walking to the front door, walking around your garden is a great start, and then just progressively increase that. And I think the other thing to remember, that it's about consistency. That's the key to this, is doing it on a regular basis. And rather than aiming for perfection, this 7,000 steps a day, consistency always trumps perfection in terms of health. So target it on a consistent basis, set goals that you can achieve, and do it regularly. And if you can, get outside, because it is so much better.
Yeah, no, that sounds like really excellent advice. Is there any good sources of information, sort of based on what we've been talking about, that the Ordnance Survey have, or something about National Walking Month or something like that you can, even if people are looking for a local walking group, that you think people might be able to look at? Well,
by far the best place to start is the Ordnance Survey website, os.uk. And on there's a whole host of information that they can access. It tells you all about OS Map and where you can access that, but it also gives you all sorts of information about the importance of physical activity, what to do, where to do it, and how to do it.
Excellent. That sounds like good advice. So right, well you're on your treadmill. I hope you enjoy the walk down Snowdon.
I'm looking forward to it, to be honest with you, Mike. And keep working your bike. Great work.
I will. Thank you very much indeed for chatting, Greg.
Perfect, mate. Good to speak. See ya.
If after listening to Professor Greg Whyte talking about movement and walking, you'd like to try and do some steps, go for a gentle stroll while working at your desk, try out the active stand. And the way to find out about that is go to my website, relaxbackuk.com. It tells you all about it there. And there's a video that shows its use, and you can buy it there as well. My next guest is Professor Andrew Hartle. He's a consultant anaesthetist and he's Chief Medical Officer at St John's Ambulance. The topic is helping people in an emergency if they are bleeding very badly or have had a cardiac arrest. But my first question was, is there a connection between St John's Ambulance and the Knights of St John?
Indirectly. I'm not an expert on the history of the organisation, but St John Ambulance, as we know it now, which is the voluntary first aid organisation, is coming up to 150 years old in the United Kingdom. There is a link to the Order of St John, and the Order of St John exists internationally, not just in the UK. But I don't think it's a direct descendancy. But I'm sure the historians of the Priory could probably correct me. But there's a lot more information about the history of the order on the St John website.
Okay, all right, very fine. So let's move on then. Cardiac arrest. Most cardiac arrests actually they don't happen in hospital. Am I right there?
That's right. So we think there are about 40,000 cardiac arrests out of hospital in the UK a year, but only about 1 in 10 of those people survive. So it's a common medical emergency with
Right.
not the greatest of outcomes.
So with that in mind, the actions of the great British public in that situation can literally be the difference between life and death.
Yeah, quite right. So if you have a cardiac arrest, then the serious consequences, irreversible brain damage and organ damage, happen within 3 to 5 minutes. So prompt emergency first aid is literally life-saving. And we know that prompt CPR, that's chest compressions, and early defibrillation are the keys to success.
Okay.
I think many people would rely on the emergency services in these circumstances, and they're absolutely brilliant, but they take time to get to the scene of emergency. And I think across the UK, the average response time for 999 services is about 7 to 8 minutes.
Okay.
And
Which is pretty good, actually.
It's pretty good, but it follows from what I've just said.
Actually, it's more than that. It's fantastic.
So that's amazing. But if nothing is happening in that 7 to 8 minutes, that explains why the outcomes from out of hospital cardiac arrest are so poor. But if members of the public can start doing simple first aid measures quickly, those are the things that will save lives.
So are we ready? Are we ready to take up that challenge? The main reason I asked that question is because there was in the press release there was one statistic about the number of people that might actually call 999.
I think so. This is research done by Nationwide Building Society, and I think they said that almost 90% would call 999, but less than half of them would feel confident starting first aid. So
well, I mean, that first statistic, I would hope that would be 100 immediately. Who's going to not call?
I can't imagine why you wouldn't call, but clearly that's the thing to do. And perhaps my first message today is that when you make that call to 999, do it on speakerphone, because that way, when the 999 controller starts giving you instructions to, feel for a pulse or start doing CPR, you can relay information to them and hear their instructions, and your hands are still free to do the first aid.
Good point.
The first important message is when you phone 999 in a medical emergency, do it on speakerphone.
Okay, actually, I've got another sort of statistics question for you. In the same press release, it said 42% of people would not step in for fear of worsening the situation. Now, I mean, what can possibly be worse if you're faced with someone who's essentially going to die?
Yeah. I mean, that's the stark truth, Mike. If you've had a cardiac arrest and nothing happens, you're going to die, and you can't make that worse.
So yeah. I had another thought actually. Are these people scared of being sued for some bizarre
Possibly, I
reason?
don't. So we don't have that much detail. I think they're just anxious. And there are a number of things. They're people are worried about not doing it right. They're worried about doing harm because they've heard perhaps that people can break ribs when you do CPR.
Hmm.
To which I'd say, better alive with broken ribs than dead
Yes.
without. Um, and there's another really important thing, which is there's people are embarrassed, particularly about doing CPR on women. There's good evidence that women have worse are less likely to be treated or resuscitated in an emergency because men in particular are concerned about touching a woman's chest or their breasts or removing clothing. Um,
Right.
and the important message here is no one's ever died of embarrassment. And if you don't do CPR in these circumstances, then the patient may well die. And St John Ambulance has been doing a big campaign here to encourage people to treat women and men the same. And we understand people's concerns, but we are talking about life and death.
Sure. So if you are in that situation, um, how can you actually know if someone is suffering something like, what are the symptoms? Will someone just drop down in front of you, or, what else?
So usually, so if it's cardiac arrest, people will become unconscious in a matter of seconds.
Right.
There's usually not much doubt. And then what we're asking people to do is to look, listen, and feel for breathing. And so you look, you get your head, close down to the victim's mouth. You're listening and feeling for breath on your ear, on the side of your face, and you're looking to see if the chest is moving. And if they're not breathing, that's when you need to, depending on whether you're on your own or whether there are other people with you. The first thing to do is to call 999, get help, get hold of a defibrillator if you can, and start CPR. If you've
Okay.
not done first aid training, don't worry, because the person at the end of the phone, the 999 controller, is going to tell you everything you need to do in the right sequence.
All right. And so the CPR, from what little training I've had, actually, I'm probably due a refresher, as are a lot of people. I seem to remember you put your hands on your chest, on the victim's chest, arms straight, and then press to the Bee Gees "Staying Alive" tune. That sort of
Yeah, so
rate.
everyone has their favourite resuscitation song. Sometimes it's Staying Alive, and some other people do it to Nelly the Elephant. I mean, what we actually say is 120 to 150 beats per minute. And again, if you're on the phone to 999, they will give you the pace that you need to do the CPR.
Right.
And if you've got access to one of these defibrillators, the defibrillator will actually make an audible sound and tell you exactly what to do and how often to do it.
Okay. Right. Let's come on to the defibrillator, because I mean I've seen them, in the street and stations, that sort of thing. I've never actually touched one.
Yep.
So if say someone was having a heart attack, a cardiac arrest in front of you at a station, and you could see one of these defibrillators, I don't know, 50 meters away, 20 meters away on the wall.
Yep.
Can you take them out of the box and take them to the person, or are they attached by a cable, or do you have to drag the person to the box?
So they're all different, which isn't ideal. So it depends where you are. So some of them you can just open and take the defibrillator out of the box. Others, you have to phone 999 and get a code, and it will say very clearly on the front of the container which one it is. But generally speaking, it's quicker to bring the defibrillator to the patient, because most people on their own can't move the patient to the
Yeah.
defibrillator. And whether you do that yourself or whether you get somebody else to do it, again, depends whether you're on your own or whether there are other people around who can help.
Yeah. Okay. So, I mean, I suppose the ideal thing is you start doing CPR, you tell someone else to call 999 and tell someone else to get the defibrillator.
Probably the other way around. I'd say I'd phone 999 first,
Right.
and then follow the instructions. If you've got 5 of you, you can break it down. But if you're if your first responsibility is to phone 999, and as I said earlier, do it on speakerphone, and then your hands are free.
Good point. All right. So let's say you've got the defibrillator, and it's in your hands.
Yep.
Do you have to? Well, we were talking about earlier. Remove any clothing from the victim.
Yes. So you do need to remove the clothing to put the pads, the electrodes in the right place. Most of the AEDs will actually tell you what to do. So there'll be both written instructions. There's usually a combination of written instructions, pictorial illustrations of what to do, and they're on the pads as well that show you where you need to put them. But you do need to take people's clothes off.
So these pads have to be on bare skin.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Right. So you got to do that. Moving on a little bit from what you actually need to do. Are there any figures? Does anyone know how many people have actually been saved by defibrillators as opposed to just using CPR? Or are there any stats on this sort of stuff?
Oh, I don't think I know those ones, Mike. If there probably are, but I don't think I know them.
Okay. That was probably a bit of an unfair question. I do sometimes specialize in them, but my thought was, I mean, most of these events probably happen at home, don't they?
Yeah, well, so 40,000 cardiac arrests a year happen outside of hospital, and I don't think we break them down as to whether they're in public or at home. But they happen at home. Yeah, they happen at home. They happen in the workplace. They happen in the office. They happen in the street. And prompt first aid in that first 3 to 5 minutes is what keeps people alive long enough to get to the advanced life support, which is the early defibrillation, which is life-saving.
Okay. So, I mean, I don't know of any stats either, whether these things happen more often at home or in the street. I can imagine them happening more often at home, but I don't know. My follow-on question to that really is: can you get defibrillators at home? Can you buy them to have at home?
Well, you can. I mean, anybody can actually buy a defibrillator, but that's we would normally only recommend people who've had training. We're not advocating that everybody should have a defibrillator in every home, and you should only. If you're going to have a defibrillator at home, there should probably be a reason for it, and you should have and obviously a defibrillator without training is much less use.
Sure.
They're also not cheap. They're several £100 to £1,000 for a defibrillator, and the stuff that's really life-saving is prompt CPR and activation of the 999 system.
Right. Okay. All right. Now the press release spoke about cardiac arrest, but also bleeding. Because bleeding to death is another very quick way to die, isn't it?
Yeah, so it's difficult to put numbers on it, but severe bleeding can cause people to die really quickly, and people can go from being alert, conscious, and talking to you to dying really quickly. And it's another medical emergency or healthcare emergency where really prompt treatment is life-saving.
Okay, so what can members of the public do apart from calling the 999, etc.? If you come across someone who's bleeding a lot, what can you do?
So the first simple first aid measure for any bleeding is just to press directly on the wound. Press with your hand, ideally press with a pad, a piece of cloth or something, and
so anything, literally a jumper, a coat, a jacket, whatever you've got.
A jumper, a jacket, a handkerchief. Handkerchiefs probably aren't quite big enough, but a rolled up jacket, a t-shirt, anything, just to put direct pressure and firm pressure on the wound just to try and stop the bleeding, and that will stop most bleeding and slow it down. So that's, prompt, immediate, direct pressure is life-saving if you can see where the bleeding point is.
Yeah, okay. And a bit more sophisticated, maybe some kind of tourniquet.
Yeah, so tourniquets, again, are simple and life-saving pieces of kit for what we call extremity bleeding. So any bleeding from the limbs, the arms and the legs, obviously you can't put a tourniquet on someone's neck or head, and you can't put a tourniquet around someone's chest or abdomen. But severe bleeding from the arms and legs, a tourniquet applied above the bleeding point, so closer to the heart, and applied promptly, can stop bleeding that isn't controllable by direct pressure.
So can you use anything for that? A bit of string, a tie, or if you're in a
So in an emergency, anything that you can use and apply and tighten up, you can use a tie, a t-shirt, a belt. There are purpose-built tourniquets that are available in the first aid kits that we're talking about. But actually, you don't have to wait for one of those. You can take your belt off, you can take a t-shirt off. Anything that will wrap round the arm or leg that you can then twist and tighten could potentially save a life.
Yeah. No, this is worth knowing. I imagine this is a bit harder for Joe Public to do because, frankly, it's a bit messy.
It's a bit messy. And the other thing that's important to tell people, it hurts. So if you're putting a tourniquet on somebody and you're tightening it, if they are conscious and not complaining, you've probably not done it tight enough. Okay. So it's really important that you have to. When you whatever you put round the leg or the arm, you can't make it tight enough just by tying the knot and pulling. It's really important that you put something in like a windlass, and there are devices called tourniquets that St John Ambulance and Citizen Aid provide, and you slide that under the bandage or the belt or the tie, and then you twist it, and it's the twisting movement that actually makes the tourniquet, the constricting bandage, tight enough. And you need to tighten that really tight to stop the bleeding, and you need to actually see the bleeding stop. And if the patient's conscious and not complaining, you haven't done it tight enough.
Right. So it's got to be tight enough, and it hurts.
Tourniquets hurt.
Yeah.
And actually, they will often ask you to stop, but don't stop until you've stopped the bleeding.
Okay, that's worth knowing. All right. So now these kits, these first aid kits, bleed kits, and defibrillators, they are available in more and more public places, and that's part of what we're talking about here. They are actually available at nationwide banks. Is that right?
That's right. So defibrillators have been increasingly available in public places over the last almost quarter of a century, and you'll see them everywhere from train stations, town halls, libraries, to village halls. Public access trauma kits or bleed control kits are a more recent innovation, and this is a really exciting collaboration where Nationwide Building Society have committed to putting both defibrillators and bleed control kits in cabinets on the front of each of their high street stores, where there are just over 600. And so those will be available not just during the store's opening hours, but 24/7, except for those branches which are in shopping centres, when obviously the public can only access them when the shopping centre is open.
Okay. All right. I suppose the next question that I immediately thought of, well, banks are shutting at an enormous rate. Are these nationwide branches going to shut?
So I understand that Nationwide have committed to keeping all of these branches open. I think it's to 2030, but certainly that's one of their that's one of the reasons why this is such an exciting project. That Nationwide have branches in most or many high streets and have committed to keeping those branches open as community hubs as much as banking centres.
Sure. All right. No, I mean, this is all very good information, and it's important for people to know that they can access these things and have some idea how to use them. But actually, even this little chat has just made me realise how ignorant I am actually in a lot of first aid, and I suspect I'm not alone.
Yeah.
So if anyone's listening to this and thinking the same thing, what's a good way to sort of get up to speed on just the very basic stuff?
Well, a couple of messages here, Mike. So first of all, these kits are designed to be able to be used by people with no training. So don't think that because you haven't done a first aid course, you can't use this kit.
Yeah, good point.
You can. It's designed to be used by people with no experience, and certainly for the defibrillators and bleed control kits available at Nationwide, you'll only be able to access those by dialing 999 and getting a code, and the controllers will talk you through everything you need to do. So that's the first thing. But you're absolutely right. We should all get some first aid training, even if it's 3 ways to save a life. And you can find details of how to get that training, by just going to the St John Ambulance website. And part of this collaboration with Nationwide and Visa is that, as well as training members of staff how to deliver first aid, there will be some community engagement work, and St John will be teaching members of the community how to do first aid and how to use this equipment.
Oh, okay. All right. So you can sign up for a short St John's course.
Yeah, I'm not quite yet. I don't think the details of how that's going to happen have yet been established, but that's what we're working towards.
Okay. All right. That sounds like something that's very useful, as indeed this whole chat has been. So, really good, useful stuff, can potentially save a lot of lives. So thank you very much indeed for taking the time to chat.
My pleasure, Mike.
Thank you very much to my guests on this week's show, and they were Professor Greg Whyte, OBE, talking about the importance of steps and just keeping a little bit active. Then it was Professor Andrew Hartle, Chief Medical Officer at St John's Ambulance. Thank you to you for listening, and have a healthy week until next week.
Thanks for listening to the Relax Back UK show. Join me, Mike Dilk, again next week for more fascinating interviews and chat. If you're listening to the podcast version, please subscribe, like, and share it with your family and friends. And have a healthy week. Until next week.